I know a lot of my fellow Bernie supporters have been frustrated by one particular point we keep hearing, that Bernie could never win the general. And one of our favorite writers, brilliant Josh Holland, has answered that question. Joshua Holland, contributor at The Nation, fellow of the Nation Institute, and host of Politics and Reality Radio, joins us to say, here's how Bernie Sanders could win in November. I think we have Josh. Josh, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, I wasn't sure if we had the right line there. So
I'm here.
Awesome. So you have broken this out into two of the most frequent arguments we hear from people who say that Bernie could never win the general, that he would never be able to withstand the attacks, and that he is not mainstream enough, if I'm paraphrasing. Can you explain those points and why you say they're wrong?
Well, so I should say that I don't think that they're necessarily wrong. If somebody is arguing that in the greater scheme of things, Bernie may have a marginal disadvantage. So the arguments that you hear all the time are, first of all, Bernie Sanders has spent his entire career in leftist politics, and if you think about Obama and all of the problems with Bill Ayers, right, he has a background that can be sifted through for all sorts of great attacks, from a Republican noise machine that invests a lot of money in this stuff and has created an excellent echo chamber. He's been involved with organizations that have, for example, endorsed the Iranian Revolution. You and I can have all sorts of opinions about this, but I think that we can agree that those kinds of things don't necessarily play well in Peoria. And Hillary Clinton, despite a lot of baggage, she's been under that kind of scrutiny for, 30 years, and they're never going to find anything new, right? They've exhausted their quiver, if you will.
As long as they're only looking in the realm of reality, which we know they're often not limited by such a construct. But go ahead.
Well, no, I'm not limiting it to reality. I mean, you got Vince Foster, right?
Right.
All of that baggage is not necessarily grounded in reality. But yes, they've thrown everything against the wall. What has stuck is what has stuck. There's nothing new that they're going to pull out in the same way that they will with Bernie Sanders, who has not had that kind of vetting, right? He's not been in national politics for a very long time, facing that kind of opposition. So then the other argument is, and a lot of political scientists will tell you, that historically non-traditional candidates that don't fit the mold of their party's mainstream, suffer to some degree in the polls. Now, the thing that they're not saying is that these candidates don't have a chance, and they are working with a relatively small sample of elections. But I quote one political scientist who says, it's probably going to take 2 to 3 points off of their ultimate popular vote total, which, that can be significant in a highly polarized country. So here's the problem. If you stop the analysis right there, it looks pretty negative. But what they're not considering are a few factors. First of all, there is the Obama coalition, right? There is the Democrats come in with inherent demographic and structural advantages in terms of the Electoral College. Those things don't go away if you have a 74-year-old who calls himself a democratic socialist. Those advantages are going to be in play for whoever becomes a Democratic nominee. This is a very straightforward argument.
Right.
The other question that I have is how effective those attacks are going to be with that group of younger people of color, educated, urban, white liberals, the so-called Obama coalition, and especially given today's media environment, right? I mean, in the 90s, the Republicans had a great ability to kind of frame the debate. There wasn't a bunch of progressive media outlets. There wasn't media watchdogs like Media Matters, and we didn't have this kind of what's been described as media siloing. Now, more and more, we're getting information from our Facebook friends, right, and not necessarily the evening news. So the ability to paint a candidate as a wild radical I think has been blunted.
Yeah, I'd like to add that I think that Republicans have kind of played out that talking point, that for the last 8 years, they've cried socialism, they've cried Marxism, they've cried all of these things that everybody says they're going to throw at Bernie. And I think that they've become kind of background noise in our political discussion arena, if you will, where we've gotten so used to hearing these terms that they don't really register with most voters, at least most Democratic voters, as they would maybe 20, 30 years ago. When you constantly call somebody a bad name, eventually it's like, yeah, we've heard that before. I think there's also a factor of that in there. Would you agree, disagree?
I would agree. I mean, that's the boy who cried wolf syndrome. But I'd also say that, we're not going to nominate somebody who is going to go up against. Well, I should say it's looking, as we continue in the Republican primary process, it's looking less and less likely that the Democratic nominee is going to go up against a strong mainstream Republican.
Right.
If you look at Donald Trump versus Bernie Sanders, this is an opponent with very, very deep flaws. And again, you should expect that if you have two candidates who are not do not fit the mainstream mold of their parties, then the fundamentals are going to play a big role, and that includes the structural advantages I was talking about.
The actual makeup of the party, the way the electorate takes place. I'm also curious on the trade issue. I have another article here from Huffington Post. It's essentially saying how Trump could become president. And they hypothesize that the so-called Rust Belt states, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, all states that went for Obama both times, did so because of his commitment to, saving the auto industry and his commitment to, middle-class jobs, if you will. And that Trump out there, whether anyone on our side believes him or not, saying that he's going to bring back these jobs and he's going to stop trade, actually means that he would be more likely to carry those states in a matchup against Hillary. Any thoughts on that, whether that argument holds any water?
I read the piece, and my general response is that I think that they overestimate Trump's candidate qualities. I mean, this is also somebody who has not been vetted. In the same way that they talk about Bernie Sanders, Trump has not faced the kind of scrutiny, anything near the kind of scrutiny that he's going to face in a general election against a Democratic candidate, either Democratic candidate. There's all sorts of garbage on Trump, and his strongest point of appeal is that he's a successful businessman and a deal maker and stuff like this. And honestly, when you go back and you dig some dirt, it's going to be very, very easy for the Democratic nominee to attack him on his strengths, because he's got a history of not only bankruptcies but shady deals and fraud,
right.
Alleged fraud and stuff like this. He's not the guy that he portrays himself to be, and the Republicans, his primary opponents, have not gone after him in the way that a Democratic nominee will. So I understand the point that was made in that piece, and I just think that they're overestimating his appeal.
Fair enough. And I still stand with this is an election unlike any we have ever seen, and it's probably pretty difficult to predict. Joshua, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
To watch more clips from our programs, hit the Watch More Videos button over here. And please be sure to hit the handy-dandy subscribe button so you'll always be up to date. Tag, you're it.